Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to 8th International Congress of Genç Ekonomistler. And I'm Tolga Dişçi from Bilkent University. I'm a graduate student in Bilkent University. And today, in the second day of our Congress, in this session, we are together with Professor Banu Demir. And she's from Oxford University in the UK and Bilkent University in Turkey. Now, she will be discussing her joint article called Trading Around Geopolitics. After our professor's presentation, we will take the questions from YouTube chat. And therefore, after we are done with the presentation, we will ask your questions to the professor. And again, welcome again, Professor Demir. And now the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation. And you can put your questions in the chat box anytime. And Tolga, please interrupt me when there are questions. I'm not able to follow them on the chat. Okay, let me start. So as Tolga said, the paper I'm going to present is called Trading Around Geopolitics, and it's joint work with Giancarlo Corsetti from EUI and Beate Vorjak from Oxford University and EBRD. So everybody's talking about economic sanctions. So particularly after the Russia's full invasion of Ukraine, Western countries have implemented comprehensive sanctions against China. But it's still a matter of question how these economic sanctions affect international trade. And it looks like it's not that trivial. Because what happens is that the sanctioning countries simply stop exporting to or importing from the sanctioned country. We understand that part, but there's also the possibility of trade diversion. So what happens is that exporters from non-sanctioning countries simply step in to fill the gap that was left by the exporters located in sanctioning countries. So you might think this is an opportunity, business opportunity. Of course, anyone can take it, but this new business opportunity doesn't come without risks. So first of all, the sanctioned country could be cut out of the international financial system. So this simply increases transaction costs or costs of transacting with this country. Of course, there's an increased risk of non-payment, so exporters are taking more risk than usual. And finally, and this is the part that we are actually focusing on in this paper, there's the increased risk of reputational damage and secondary sanctions. I'm going to explain what we mean by secondary sanctions in a minute. What do we do in this paper? So we simply try to understand this trade-off between new business opportunities and heightened risks when it comes to the effect of sanctions on international trade. So we have a simple theoretical model to understand the mechanisms through which these trade-offs actually work in the data, and then we are using detailed customs data from Turkey to understand the effect of how exporters behaved after. Turkish exporters behaved after Western countries imposed sanctions on China on Russia in 2022. So let me talk a little bit about Russian sanctions. They're quite different from other economic sanctions that had been implemented earlier by the US and other countries. So first of all, they are very comprehensive. So they don't only include military products and arms, but the sanctions also cover dual-use technology, industrial and luxury products as well. And it wasn't only sanctions on trading with China, trading with Russia. I don't know why I'm saying China. Maybe there will be some sanctions that will be targeted against China as well. Anyway, okay. So it's not only trade-related sanctions, but Russian companies were also cut from the SWIFT system. So to be able to, so probably you all know what the SWIFT system is. For if you want to transfer money internationally, the US dollar, then it has to go through the SWIFT system. So if companies are cut from the SWIFT system, then it becomes very, very difficult and costly to trade and to make any financial transactions. And these sanctions were implemented pretty quickly as well. If you remember, the full invasion of Russia, Russia's full invasion of Ukraine was in February 2022, and most of the sanctions were already in place as of March. So just like 1 month after the invasion. So this episode of economic sanctions is quite unique because of the size of the sanctioned country. So before the invasion, as of 2021, Russia was the 11th largest country in the world. So in terms of scale of the sanctioned countries, this is quite unique. And why are we focusing on Turkish exports? Because Turkey didn't impose sanctions, so the country didn't join the Western countries in imposing sanctions on Russia, which means that actually, regardless of whether it's a sanctioned product or non-sanctioned product, exporting to the Russia was not illegal in Turkey. But what we are seeing in the data is I'll explain later, affiliates of Western multinationals located in Turkey seem to have concerns about increasing their exports to China and taking this new business opportunity due to reputational damage and the fear of secondary sanctions. Okay, so actually reputational risk is real. So there's a survey conducted among 3,000 Americans, and 61% of them think that doing business in China is like being an accomplice of the war. So there is quite some consumer sentiment, and only 30% agree that it's not a company's role to decide. So it is that task should be left to the government. So the authors of the survey and the paper conclude that so probably there's Milton Friedman statement. So it looks like only a minority of respondents would agree that with the Friedman statement that the business of business is business. So it seems it's not actually the case. And these are some extracts from the press about how firms how companies which still interacted with Russia were sort of like condemned almost on media. I'm sorry, just give me a moment. Okay, So let me explain what we mean by secondary sanctions. So the goal of secondary sanctions is to prevent third countries from trading with countries subject to sanctions imposed by another country. So which means that it's so these agents or parties are not the citizens of the sanctioned country or based in the sanctioned country, but they are still subject to these sanctions. So one example is that when U.S. imposed sanctions against China, the country also imposed secondary sanctions for non-U.S. persons trading with Iran. So we saw this before, and so the biggest challenge for the parties facing the risk of secondary sanctions is that they can simply be cut from the U.S. financial institutions, and this means that they won't be able to do any transactions, for instance, using U.S. dollars, which is the vehicle currency, the dominant currency, as you know. So it's a big risk. So let's go back to the empirical setting. So why we are focusing on Turkey is I'm just showing you almost raw data. So these are monthly export transactions by Turkish firms to Russia versus the rest of the world at the monthly and product level. So we are visualizing from firm, country, product, and time effects to be able to make sure that this is not coming from like particular products or particular type of firms. As you can see, so the red vertical line simply marks the Russia's full invasion of Ukraine, and then so while so the two Turkish exports to Russia and rest of the world were sort of moving almost together. There's of course more volatility for the Russian one because it's just one country, but after the invasion, there's a big jump in Turkish exports to Russia, while the exports to the rest of the world remain on the same trend, basically flat. So this is the motivation for focusing on Turkish exports, because we can learn something about the motives, the trade-offs these firms are facing when exporting to a sanctioned country. Okay, so as I said, we are using detailed customs data from Turkey for the 2021-2023 period. So this is almost like a standard customs data set, which records firms engaging in a transaction, detailed products, harmonized system. So that's the standard product classification used in international trade, destination country, and time, obviously. But on top of that, the Turkish data provides two important pieces of information. So one is payment method. So we know how the transaction was paid. So whether it's like prepayment, which we call cash in advance. In this case, the importer pays the exporter before the exporter ships the good to the destination, or open account. So it's the complete opposite, in which case exporter simply produces and ships the good to the destination. Importer pays only after the goods arrive in the destination, so possibly after like 90 days or so. And on top of that, the customs data from Turkey also report the currency of invoice. So we know whether it's the transaction was in US dollars, euros, or Turkish liras, or any other currency. We are able to merge this data using unique firm identifiers with standard firm registry, which tells us about the industrial operation of the firm as well as ownership structure. So this is going to be particularly important for us because we will be distinguishing between pure domestic firms and affiliates of Western multinationals operating in the country. Intentionally, we are excluding re-exports from the data. So what is re-export? Say German company exports to Turkey and then Turkey re-exports to Russia. So this is almost like sanction busting. So we are not interested in that type of trade. So we are intentionally excluding re-exports from the data. When we are focusing on companies or Turkish firms that has exported to Russia at some point during this sample period. So this leaves us with around 18,000 firms. Okay, so before jumping on the empirics, let me tell you what we are expecting to see. So what are the relevant channels that we should be controlling for or investigating in the data to understand the trade-off between profits and costs and risks when exporting to a country subject to sanctions. So this is a pretty standard framework. It is building on Meredith Crowley and co-authors' earlier work and Schmidt-Eisner's seminal work on the choice of payment methods in international trade. So we are assuming oligopolistic competition. So there's Cobb-Douglas production technology that combines labor and intermediate inputs. That's pretty standard. So we have firms located in a country which we call the origin country, exporting to a destination country at some time period, and then they make a couple of decisions when exporting their product. So what are the things that they take into account? So think about the profit maximization of this firm. So the first term you'll see in the first line is simply the revenue of the firm. The second term is marginal cost of production. That's pretty standard. The third term is capturing the currency management cost. So, for instance, when exporting to a country under sanctions like Russia, right, using US dollar becomes more expensive because Russia is now cut from the SWIFT system. And the last component, the fourth one, is capturing the reputational risk. So the firm might simply lose profits and even like future profits because of this reputational risk due to two reasons. So one is if it's, for instance, also exporting to the US, then it may not be allowed to export to US anymore if US authorities realize that this company is actually still trading with Russia. But in addition to that, if you remember the pieces that I showed you from media, customers might simply boycott this company, or large companies, for instance, located in Western countries which are imposing sanctions against Russia, might simply say, okay, so I'm not going to buy from you anymore because you're still trading with China. So you're still trading with Russia. So you're part of the war. So you're actually supporting it. So that's the first line, right? So the firm is taking into account the revenues, production costs, and costs that arise because of exporting to a sanctioned country. And then the optimization is standard, so it's with respect to the demand it faces in the market. So what you see, so there's also you also see a superscript C. So that's the currency choice. So the firm is actually solving this profit maximization problem for a given currency. and then it simply compares profits, right, arising from the use of different currencies, and then chooses the currency that yields the largest expected profits. Okay, so you can think this of as a two-tier optimization problem. Now, let's see what are the trade-offs, or what are the main predictions coming out of the model. So obviously, markups will increase with the market share of exporters, right? So we have an oligopolistic market. It's not perfect competition, and it's not monopolistic competition with CES, right? In which case we would have like constant markups regardless of what's happening in the market. Here, our markups are endogenous, and when say Western countries simply stop exporting to Russia, then the market share of Turkish exporters simply increase. So that simply allows Turkish exporters to charge higher markups in the Russian market. And then the second prediction that comes out of the model is that the attractiveness of cash in advance increases because we are expecting the probability of non-payment by Russian importers increases after the war. And third, the third one is about the currency choice. So the currency choice is a little more complicated, and there are three channels that are at work. So one is what we call strategic complementarity, which means that you want to denominate your exports in a currency, in the currency that other exporters in the same destination country are denominating their exports, right? So this is strategic complementarity. So deviating from your competitors in the same destination market would simply put you at risk. So this is what we call strategic complementarity. Use the currency that your competitors are also using. The second term is what we call operational hedging. And that happens, for instance, because so the Turkish exporter might also be importing inputs, right? And so the exporter may want to denominate in the same currency as its imports to be able to hedge its currency risk because of operational reasons. So it's revenues versus costs. The third one is financial cost, right? And this is so in our setting, it is going to be related to the fact that Russia was cut from the SWIFT system, which means that using US dollar is, for instance, is more costly now for many exporters. And the last part is reputational risk, right? So these are important considerations. And when we assume sticker prices, right, expected profits from choosing Russian currency or any vehicle currency. So vehicle currency means like third country currencies like US dollar, Chinese currency, or euros relative to Turkish lira is going to be simply proportional to these different terms. And these are what we are going to at least control for in the empirical setting. Okay, empirics. So we are doing a we are estimating a standard difference and differences specification as well as event study. So it's not even staggered because so everyone simply faced the shock at the same time. So on the left-hand side, we have some outcome variable related to exports at the firm, product, destination country, and time level. Okay, so these are the indices that represent different dimensions of the data. Our variable of interest is this interaction between a post-invasion dummy, which switches on after February 2022 with the invasion of Russia, and it takes the value 0 otherwise. And it's so the other component of the interaction is another binary variable that is that is equal to 1 when the destination country is Russia and 0 otherwise. Of course, we need to control for many things, right? So what is it? So there might be some, so we need to control for the trend, right? So we do that by including firm product destination fixed effects, which means that we are looking at within a firm product destination flow over time to see whether we see a differential trend after the invasion, after the war. And we're controlling for anything, any shock that comes to particular products with the inclusion of product time fixed effects. And there could be some firm-specific supply or demand shocks, and that's something that we control with the firm time fixed effects. And we are expecting, so for instance, for simply value of exports or quantity of exports, we are expecting the coefficient estimate for beta to be positive. And the event study specification is similar, so it's controlling for the same set of fixed effects, but instead of looking at the average effect in the post-invasion period, it's looking at pre-invasion and post-invasion periods at a more disaggregated level. And here is the baseline, right? So this is the definitive specification. So it basically says that there's a quite large increase in Turkish exports to Russia after the invasion of Ukraine, and we see the effect both for values and quantities. So the difference between value and quantity is obviously what's happening to prices or unit values, right? And then oh, okay. So I think hyperlinks don't work here. Do they? They don't.
Probably
It's
not.
fine. Probably not. Okay, then you have to believe me. You have to believe what I say. So on this slide, which I'm not able to jump to, so we are running the same specification, baseline specification for sanctioned and non-sanctioned products. And interestingly, we find an effect on both sides. So it's not, so the effect here is not driven by sanctioned products only. We have actually a comparable increase in Turkish exports to Russia in non-sanctioned products as well. And this is the event study estimates. Okay, so it is very nice. So there's no pre-trend before the shock hit in February 2022. So in March there's quite a big drop in Turkish exports to Russia as well. So because there was probably some, Turkish firms as well probably just stopped a bit to see what was happening. But later, starting from April, the trend starts, and as of June, so we see quite a big increase compared to the pre-invasion period in Turkish exports to Russia. Now, okay, so is it something that is it a business opportunity that all firms wanted to benefit regardless of their ownership structure? It seems the answer is no, right? Because so when we introduce a triple interaction time, a triple interaction now between our a double interaction and a dummy variable that simply identifies the Turkish affiliates of Western multinationals, we see that these affiliates simply reduce their exports to Russia. Or at least they didn't increase at all. So if you just simply sum up these two, so statistically speaking, the coefficient, the sum of the two coefficients is not different from 0. But if you look at the coefficient estimate on the double interaction, so as in the previous slide, so it's still positive and significant for both values and quantities. So it looks like Western affiliates of Western multinationals simply hesitated, right, to increase their exports to Russia, although it wasn't illegal for them to export from Turkey because they are located and registered in Turkey, and Turkey was not imposing any sanctions. So if this was only about secondary sanctions, right, then we would see this hesitation by affiliates of Western multinationals only for sanctioned products, right? And we have the effect there. But if you look at the effect, the coefficient on the triple interaction for non-sanctioned products, for which there's no risk of secondary sanctions, so it's even larger, right? So that's why we think, yes, the fear of secondary sanctions is a channel, but a bigger channel is a reputational risk. So even if there is no there's no legal consequences for these companies, for these affiliates to export to Russia from Turkey, they still don't want to take this opportunity because of the reputational effects. And so you might think, maybe this is just for a multinational thing. So any affiliate of a Western multinational, any affiliate of a multinational company operating in Turkey might have behaved exactly the same way. It looks like it isn't. So here we do a horse race between affiliates of Western multinationals and other and affiliates of other multinationals, and we don't see an effect for others. So we only see the effect for those that are imposing these sanctions against Russia. And the same is true for size. So it's not a size effect. So these affiliates are obviously on average much larger compared to relative to pure domestic firms, pure domestic exporters in the country. But when we control for the triple interaction between post Russia and firm size, indicating large companies, so we don't. Our estimates are still robust. And if you ask, so which Western multinational, so which one matters more? It's U.S. So European countries, Australia, Canada, and the US, they all impose sanctions against Russia. But when we just dig deeper into the ownership structure of these multinationals, we see that this fear of reputational risks and secondary sanctions was more binding for those affiliates with at least 10% of US ownership. Right, okay. So I'll try to finish in 4 or 5 minutes so that we will have enough time, hopefully, for questions.
It's up to you, Hocam,
Okay.
completely.
Okay, so let's see margins of adjustment. So far, we are not restricting the sample at all. So even a company has exported to Russia at some period since 2021 and didn't export at all afterwards, it is still in the data. What we want to know now is, so how what margins were at work when for this boost in Turkish exports to Russia. So the first margin is entry and exit. So do we see more exit by Western multinationals compared to domestic Turkish pure Turkish firms? It is true. So actually, Western multinationals were more likely to exit the Russian market after February 2022, while Turkish firms, pure Turkish firms, were indeed less likely to leave the Russian market compared to other destinations after the war. So exit seems to be an important margin. And when we look at the continuing exporters, so so now we are restricting the sample to firms that or exporters that exported both before and after the invasion. We see that yes, on the intensive margin, they also reduced, they also increased their exports, and similarly, Western multinationals, which still kept their business in the Russian market, they still exported less to Russia compared to other countries. And new products. So it looks like Turkish firms simply introduced new products or added new products to their export basket to Russia, while Western multinationals, even if they continued to export to Russia, they didn't simply introduce new products when exporting to the sanctioned country. And payment methods and invoicing currency. So as predicted by the model, we see an increase in the share of cash in advance exports to Russia compared to other countries, and this is expected, right? Because so remember the trade-off these exporters are facing. Yes, there's a new profitable opportunity, so they have the intention to take it, but at the same time now. There's a lot of uncertainty on the Russian side, so it is likely that some of the Russian importers won't be able to pay for their imports. So that's why Turkish exporters want to stay safe, and they simply ask the payment in advance, right, before shipping the goods. So that's why we have an increase in the share of cash in advance exports. And as expected, so remember that Russian companies were cut from the SWIFT system, so we see a reduction in the share of US denominated and euro denominated exports. And so I don't have it on this table, but there's quite a significant increase in Turkish lira denominated exports to Russia compared to other countries after the war. And remember the first prediction from the model. So once the Western companies simply left Russia because of sanctions, so the market share of Turkish exporters simply increased, and this simply gave them the opportunity to raise their markups. And that's actually what we see here. So both the unit value, which is our proxy for prices, both the unit value and the estimated markup. So I'm not going to go into the details of how we estimate the markup, but both unit values of prices and markups increased to when they were exporting to the Russian market after the war. Finally, let's put these numbers into some context, right? Okay, so 30% increase, 20% decrease. So share of cash in advance exports increasing, decreasing. So how should we understand it? So as a trade economist, the way I understand things is in terms of tariffs, right? So here is the exercise we are doing here. We are asking the following question. So given the reduction in exports by the affiliates of Western multinationals, right, operating in Turkey, what would be the equivalent tariff increase that would induce exactly the same reduction in their exports, right? So that's the empirical exercise that we are trying to do here. So to be able to answer that question, we are using our estimates, right, baseline estimates, but we also need an estimate for the what we call trade elasticity. And depending on the different estimates of trade elasticity in the literature, the tariff equivalence of these reputational risks is varying between 25% and almost 380%. So this 380% happens because the short-run trade elasticity is estimated to be very very small. But our preferred estimate is this long run estimate by using the long run trade elasticity estimate by Chris Bohm and co-authors in a recent paper. So it's around 80%. So what this means is that in the absence of any sanctions, so if Russia imposed an almost 81% tariff against these companies, they would show exactly the same behavior as they show for the reputational risk. And finally, we want to know what happens to Turkish exports at the firm level, because so what we are showing right now is Turkish exports to Russia are increasing relative to other destinations. So it's a relative statement. But there are two possibilities here. So one is Turkish exporters might simply have reduced their exports to other countries and increase their exports to Russia. This is what we call trade diversion, right? Or they might simply keep their exports to other destinations, but increase their exports to Russia as well. So this is what we call trade creation. Of course, from Turkish firms' point of view, trade creation is more desirable. So to understand, so here what we need is some exposure, some firm level exposure variable, right, to be able to understand the change in firm level exposure, because we are not exploiting country or product dimensions here, right? And we think that those firms that were which had these sanctioned products in their export market to any destination before the war would be more likely to take this opportunity, because they were already familiar with these products, so they could increase their exports to Russia, because that was these were the products that were mainly demanded by the Russian importers. So this we are interacting this firm level exposure variable with our post dummy, and we see that actually there was some trade creation for Turkish exports, so they could increase their overall export, so it wasn't only coming from trade diversion. Okay, I think I'm done. So I'll quickly conclude, and then I'm happy to answer your questions if you have any. So what we try to do in this paper is to understand the trade-off between new business opportunities or export opportunities and heightened risks when it comes to exporting to a country under sanctions by third country exporters. And we find that, so it's not really straightforward. So the firms are actually making adjustments on multiple margins. And one important, so the main result of the paper is that, so even if some companies are not actually are not legally bound to comply with these sanctions, they simply avoid transacting with the companies in this sanctioned country because of the reputational risks, and these reputational risks are sizable. So our estimates suggest that the reputational risks arising from exporting to Russia has a tariff equivalent of almost 80%. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor, for your presentation. And now we have some questions. Actually, for the sake of time adjustments, we have 5 questions here. Some are related with the technical stuff. Probably you have already mentioned some part of the questions, of course. But to make it more clear, maybe we can go over them very briefly. So let's start with our first question here. Let me read it for everyone who is right now listening it. How does the study integrate trade diversion, currency invoicing, and payment terms under fragmentation? And Actually, this is the important part, I guess. Why is this multi-dimensional approach better than single-channel sanction analysis?
Okay, so let me answer based on my understanding of the question. So it's not clear to me what is like fragmentation means here. So is it yeah? So I'm not gonna touch on that part. But the multidimensional approach. So what I understand is okay. So it's yeah, we are so Turkish exports. So exports will increase. So why do we care about looking at different adjustments? So that's what I understand from the question. Multidimensional, single channel. I don't know what single channel sanction is, but what we are trying to show is that so the firms are actually so it's not a trivial business opportunity for firms, and they have to take into account different types of risks and costs that comes with this new business opportunity. So given the rich data we have, the model is we find the model quite useful because it is telling us how these different adjustments would be made by these firms. So I think payment method adjustment is very important, and another important dimension is currency invoicing, because remember that's also one of the reasons why we are seeing another trade war now between US and China is because US is actually scared of losing its dominance as a vehicle currency in global trade. So if these wars, uncertainties, and fragmentation simply continue, then it seems US dollar might actually lose its importance at some point. I hope I answered the question, but if I haven't, I mean, you can just find my email. Just email me, maybe with more explanation, so I can answer better.
Thank you, Hocam. Let's continue with a discussion question about it. Because right now sanctions and trade wars are very, let's say, popular among world. Therefore, of course, a lot of people they are curious about these situations and their effects on overall trade. So the second question is, do sanctions show that geopolitical shocks rewire supply chains rather than deglobalize trade? I mean, does the fragmentation mean less trade overall or simply altered trade routes, according to
This is
your
a very
analysis?
good question. This is a very good question, and it's $1 million question. So everyone wants to know the answer. So it's a bit of both. So it looks like there's not much of deglobalization, but blocks are changing, and blocks are changing almost weekly now. So it's not that, for instance, now China is trading less, but it has simply diverged its trade from, say, US and towards other countries. But there are two things happening at the same time with increased geopolitical risks or with geopolitical shocks. So one is, yes, trade diversion, but there's at the same time increased uncertainty, which is simply reducing business activities and sort of slowing down economic activity. So even if we see some reduction in global trade, it wouldn't be clear whether it's because of deglobalization or simply increased risks due to geopolitical tensions are simply slowing down economic activity, and global trade is simply following the trend. So we will probably know the answer a little later. So it's too early to understand to understand the actual mechanisms.
Thank you. I'm continuing with the other question, and it is about the reputation concerns you mentioned. And they ask, how significant is the $50 million loss from the Western subsidiaries reputation concerns versus other non-tariff barriers, and what mechanisms turn these reputation risks into measurable trade losses?
So 50 million is quite sizable, actually. But as I said, I didn't even mention. So probably whoever asked the questions, this is coming from the paper. In the presentation, I didn't want to highlight the dollar value because it's very difficult to put it into a context. So that's why I think this tariff equivalence measure is much more informative, and we are talking about a sizable tariff equivalence to generate the same effect on trade, even when we use this pretty high trade elasticity of 5, it's 25%, and even 25% is a high level for tariffs.
And one more about the discussion part. Maybe it is again a $1 million question. I'm not sure, but let me ask you too. Do you think this mechanism which you explain weakens the effectiveness of Western sanctions, or does it stabilize global trade networks by preventing complete so-called market collapse in general?
Yeah, it's a difficult question, and it's a very personal question, actually, because it depends on what you have in your objective function, right? If policymakers have in their objective functions, okay, so we need to stop the war, and that is, I think, what it should be, right? Then obviously this is weakening. So although it's not illegal, right? So but what Turkish exporters are doing is not illegal. It simply weakens the effectiveness of Western sanctions, because now Russian importers are able to get the stuff they need, right, from other countries. But if you don't have anything related to politics, war, humanity, your objective function, and just think in terms of the efficiency of the global trading system, yes, I mean, so it is in a sense, so this trade diversion is in a sense stabilizing maybe it's not stabilizing, but at least it's offsetting some of the losses arising from sanctions. It is true, but I think the true objective function should definitely have some weight for the political economy part.
Thank you. And the last one, it is, I'm not sure whether it was included completely in your paper or the presentation, but they ask you about, have you observed any signs of adjustment or reversal? Let's say we do not have to mention some, I think, periods like after mid 2023, but the question is actually, are we observing a return to the pre-war era pattern, or is divergence from that pattern increasing?
In terms of growth, it is true that after mid 2023, so it's not positive, but in terms of levels, it's not going back to pre-war levels. So the growth simply slows down, right? But in terms of levels, so Turkish exports to Russia are not going back to their pre-war levels. So still remains high.
So are you expecting a divergence from the pre-war era? Is it possible to make predictions about it, do you think, right now? I mean, in the following years.
In the following years, I mean, I don't know. It depends on geopolitics, right? I have no idea. Unfortunately, I can't make any predictions. But it is true that so it's not as striking. So the growth relative to the pre-war period is not as striking as in the earlier months of the post-war period. It is true, but in terms of level, it's not back to the pre-war.
Thank you so much, Professor Demir. Do you want anything to add about your presentation, about the papers, or about the questions?
So I mean, thank you very much. So this was fun, and if there's anyone who's interested in papers or wants to, chat or have any other questions, so please feel free to email me anytime. I'll try to answer the questions as well on the email.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. And we were glad that we were together with Professor Banu Demir from Oxford University today in the second day of our Congress. And we will see all the one who is right now listening this keynote speak in the next sessions. And thank you so much, Professor Demir, and thank you for all others.
Thank you very much.